Start the meeting, and I'd like to invite you all as conveniently as you can. I know you're mid-bite to stand with me and pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we got a nice group. Let's sing God Bless America. Okay. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Take your seats and take a moment of inspiration for us. I think we're in for a treat today, and I wanted to have something a little bit special, I think, for a moment of inspiration. It's from Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, just so we know, it goes way back. And its goal is to live a value-driven life, which I think as Kiwanians is something very important to us. So here they are. Health enough to make work a pleasure. Wealth enough to support our needs, strength enough to overcome difficulties we face, grace enough to confess our weaknesses, patience enough to toil until some good is accomplished, love enough to help others selflessly, faith enough to seek spiritual support in times of need, and hope enough to forsake anxiety and embrace the possibilities. So that's something we can put under our hats and think about this whole week. Thank you, Ken. Thank you very much. I can't tell you how it lifts my heart seeing a room full of people gathered together in a common cause to help the children of our community. So thank you all. Give yourselves a round of applause. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce our beloved member, Ken Wildrick, to introduce our speaker.
Well, I had to go to Don's webpage because there's so many things that he's done. And I'm going to read to you what part of that says. First of all, right now, he's the president and CEO of the Lehigh Valley Economic Development Corporation. He's going to tell us about that, so I won't go further into that. Prior to leading this organization, he's been in a variety of public and private settings. He was twice elected mayor of Bethlehem, twice elected the Lehigh County executive, and he was appointed to the Pennsylvania, if I come straight, he was appointed Pennsylvania Secretary of the Department of General Services in Governor Ed Rendell's administration. He's also served as president of the Pennsylvania League of Cities and as a member of the Bethlehem City Council. Prior to the public sector career, he worked for the Fortune 500 company, PP&L, in Allentown, and served at Moravian College. I was very pleased to see on the webpage a quotation from him that I think sums up something about the man that I think you will all appreciate as he speaks. This is his quote: "Organic life has an end date, usually following a natural period of decline. Yet to develop a way to turn back the clock and restore youth. Communities, cities, and regions are the opposite. They are constantly reborn. They have no expiration date. The screen refreshes itself with new people, new generations, and new uses for old places. That's the magic, mystery, and allure of economic development and building community. Now, with someone like that kind of outlook, I think we're in good hands, and I'd like to introduce Don Cunningham.
Yeah, thanks for that nice introduction, Dr. Wildrick, and thank you, Kiwanis Club, Easton and Palmer, for having me here. I want to recognize from my team, our team at Lehigh Valley Economic Development, Andrew Kleiner. Andrew is our Director of Community Outreach. So he is our liaison to the 62 different municipalities across what we call the Lehigh Valley, which in our definition is Lehigh and Northampton counties, 17 school districts, 2 counties. And I'm going to get into some of the statistics, but thank you for the introduction. Thank you for having me here. That quote actually came from, I write a business and economics column in the Morning Call on Sundays, about every 5 weeks or so. So if anybody still reads a newspaper, I don't know. It's in there where I give some of the thoughts about what's going on in the valley and why, and try to weave a bit of a perspective. As you can tell from Dr. Wildrick's introduction, I have a hard time keeping a job. I keep moving from job to job, but I've been able to do that all in one place. So I was born and raised here in the Lehigh Valley in Bethlehem. My family's been here for some time. My kids grew up here. Judge Jim Narleski, I've known. Our kids grew up together. So I can look around most rooms and see people I know and be familiar with what has come before and what we're working on to try to keep things going for our current generations and future generations. I'm very fortunate now to be able to be in this position. I've been in this position for the last 10 years. Let me just take a moment to explain the organization that I run and what we do, because we have a tendency to get lost in the alphabet soup of acronyms of different organizations across the Lehigh Valley. The acronym you'll see for our group is LVEDC. What that means is this organization began in the mid-90s. And for those of you who have been here for some time, if you kind of take your brain back to the mid-90s, economically, socially, it was very different Lehigh Valley. And at that time was the beginning of the decline of manufacturing across the United States. It was not necessarily the beginning, but the beginning of the end of steel making in the Lehigh Valley. And a lot of the ancillary manufacturing that went with that, we know the area was full of textile mills. At that point, textile production was starting to move to Asia. We were in a downward decline in America, kind of ruling the roost in the world economically for manufacturing. So at that time, a bunch of the CEOs of larger employers in the Lehigh Valley, Air Products, PPL, and so forth, got together and said, we need to work on a reinvention, a reconfiguring of the economy of the Lehigh Valley, and we need to do it in a formalized way, regionally. Which they kind of gave birth to this idea of looking at Lehigh and Northampton County and the 62 municipalities more as a region, right? I mean, for those of us who've been here a while, we remember a time before we kind of referred to ourselves as the Lehigh Valley. It was Allentown, it was Bethlehem, it was Easton, it was Forks, it was wherever you went to. If you were from Easton, you didn't go to Allentown, you got lost on the one-way streets. If you were Bethlehem, you didn't go to Easton because it was too far away, right? And now my wife and I, we come down to Easton for dinner, we'll go to Allentown, and there's much more kind of cross-integration of the Lehigh Valley. So the challenge of creating an organization like this, and the reason it came out of the private sector, quite frankly, was because they didn't have the parochial boundaries, right? When I was mayor of Bethlehem, I was elected by the people of Bethlehem just before Bethlehem. When I was county executive in the other county, we were just for that county, right? So it's hard sometimes to get political leaders, primarily, to see that there's strength in a region, there's strength in kind of pooling your money together. So that's how we came to be. We are an organization of 15 people. The counties use us for a lot of the economic development services that they used to have themselves. So Not everybody has to duplicate over 62 municipalities and counties. We have one spot where we can do that. And we can work on some things, public and private. So, and I think this has been a strength, and I'm going to get into an economic update, give you some underlying factors, some of the things we know and are intuitive, we see it with our eyes, some of the things that are going on in the economy, we don't know, we don't see, and it's important for us. So we do a lot of research. We try to understand down to the finite detail what's taking place, what type of jobs are being developed, what type of skills are in need. We work closely with our education sector, K-12, our 9 through 12 grade career and technical schools, our community colleges, to try to align the curriculum and the skills that are being taught here to what the economy is putting out, which is, that's a bit like moving the Titanic. But we've been able to do that because the private sector is always kind of ahead in terms of creating, innovating, creating jobs, developing technology before our schools are necessarily lined up with creating that skill set. And you'll see that there's a tremendous demand for skill set in the manufacturing arts and the trades. The career and technical schools have probably never been more important to fueling what we're creating here and what's being created. And the final thing I'll say in an introductory way is a lot of things just happen because there's a market for it to happen. And I'll start right there is the free market, the capitalist system of America will find its way to what makes sense for it. Let me start with a little video. I forgot we're gonna have a video. This is a video we produced locally about the Lehigh Valley. So anyway, this was a video we produced recently.
The true hallmark of any location is the people, those who choose to call it home. The Lehigh Valley is the land of makers and dreamers. Hard work is our heritage, and it's that heritage that fuels us. Our traditions unite us. Our legacy is determination. Our future will be built on the principles of creativity and perseverance. Because when others said we couldn't, we did. We've surmounted obstacles and exceeded expectations. Some may think of us as underdogs. Yeah? Well, never underestimate the underdog. We're artisans, craftsmen, scientists, teachers, and students. But most of all, we're neighbors. This isn't the big city, but it's not quite Mayberry either. Where salt of the earth meets clever ambition, that's where you'll find us. And our time is now. Because when the bases are loaded and the pressure's on, we don't crack, we strive, we thrive. The Lehigh Valley has been and always will be home to those with great vision. We know the value of an honest day's work. We practically wrote the book on it. We don't just innovate, we elevate. Out of the embers from the hands that forged a nation come those that are crafting the future. We dream big because good enough is never good enough. They say it takes a village. Well, we say it takes a valley. And the Lehigh Valley is committed to excellence. Now, if you'll excuse us, we've got work to do.
Up on that shot right there.
Oh, that is.
That was done with a drone. We used a local company, Fire Rock Productions, did a great job. We worked hard on the script. And we tried to capture the history and the current situation in Lehigh Valley. Part of what we do is market. We market the region for targeted economic growth. And I'll talk about that in a moment. And that's part of our role. So let me go real quickly to not the video again, but so you all know this, right? But to market to when I talk to many groups, we travel, we talk to site selectors, location advisors, companies, CEOs, people all across the country as we basically sell the assets of the Lehigh Valley in targeted ways. This here, though, as you see where we are, really is the underlying foundation of what has occurred here and how we're able to strategically work on things in the Lehigh Valley. And you all know this, but here we sit. What you may not realize is that when you take a circle around the Lehigh Valley, basically a 6-hour drive, you go north to Boston, south to Richmond, west beyond Pittsburgh into Ohio and into the Great Lakes and the Midwest, you have 1/3 of the United States population, 1/3 of the United States consumers. So if you wonder why, we've seen the type of growth, market-driven growth that we've seen here. You are 1 hour from the port of Newark, which is the major port of entry to serve Pennsylvania, right? You are 80 miles from New York City. You're 60 miles above Philadelphia. And what do you have? A pretty big population center with a lot of land, a lot of infrastructure, quick access to market, and a lot of talent, workforce. So you put that in a bag, shake it up, and what do you get, right? You've got a recovery that's extraordinary. When you look at, I said, we started in the mid-90s, and you watched what went down and went away in the Lehigh Valley, particularly in the area of manufacturing. Didn't have a huge life sciences sector, didn't have a huge technology sector. And then you fast forward to today, the turnaround of specific land, like in Bethlehem, where you had 4.5 miles of old steel mills, which are now 85% reused. Most of our brownfields, look at what Easton has done with the old Simone Silk Mill down on 13th Street. Unbelievable, right? And you have start adding up all of these projects together. The underlying fuel to be able to do that does come back to location, right? So that becomes your central part of any strategy. You will see two statistics around the Lehigh Valley. Why I said at the beginning, we define the Lehigh Valley as Lehigh and Northampton counties. You will hear references to the Lehigh Valley that include much more than that, less than that. You will hear all kinds of things about it. The core definition of Lehigh Valley is Lehigh and Northampton counties. But from the federal government perspective, they include, don't ask me why, Carbon County and Warren County, New Jersey. So these are why I put up two population numbers. The top number is the population of Lehigh and Northampton counties. The second one is the actual federal government population of the Lehigh Valley. So we do a lot of data, a lot of research, both for in-market use to educate people about what's coming here and also for the outside work that we do. So if you're doing data dives at all, you have to extract Lehigh or either extract Lehigh and Northampton counties from the total, or you have to extract Carbon and Warren, whichever way you want to look at it. Let me tell you some things that you may intuitively kind of realize from driving around, from living here to seeing what's going on, but you may not understand in full actually how significant of what's occurring here. Sometimes understanding what's happening in your own backyard and keeping perspective on that is difficult when you're living in that yard every day. So all the statistics I'm giving you are open source data. This is United States Department of Commerce. Every year, the United States Department of Commerce adds up all the economic output coming out of the United States of America. And they break it down in two ways. They break it down by geography, by states and metropolitan statistic areas, and they break it down by industry. So you can go fine point down into what's going on across the United States and how does one market compare to another, right? So we are now at about 43 billion a year in economic output, in GDP. GDP is the total sum of all goods and services produced. We extract out the public sector numbers. So these are just private economy numbers. We take out the government, we take out education. If we use that, we'd be about 5-6 billion higher. But that's our number. So what does that mean? What does GDP mean? Well, okay, 42.9, that sounds great. I don't know what that means. Well, it's the 65th largest economy in the United States, right? So the Lehigh Valley, these two counties, 65th largest economy in the United States. Okay, well, what does that mean? Okay, this is overlaid across the states, 50 states of the United States. The Lehigh Valley, our little region, home to the Kiwanis Club of Easton and Palmer, has more economic output than the state of Alaska, the state of Wyoming, and the state of Vermont, right? So, okay, well, that sounds pretty good. Now lay it across the countries of the world. And these are just straight GDP numbers. You can go online when you go home and do it. If you don't believe me, we live in a world where nobody really believes everybody. Facts are fungible. Everybody's got their own. So go home and verify it all. 88th largest economy in the world. Not bad, right? Where does that come from? And this is where I'm gonna maybe turn things upside down to what you think and what you believe. If you can't read that from there, I don't blame you. I'll read it to you. So breaking it down by what we call sector, and the definitions of sector that I'm using are not our words. These are United States Department of Commerce words, how they decide to bundle businesses into groupings. Our largest industry by sector of output in the Lehigh Valley is finance, insurance, and real estate. Probably didn't think that, right? A lot of that has been driven by the real estate market, particularly the commercial and industrial real estate market. Our second largest, only off by about 200 million, is manufacturing. And I'm going to talk about manufacturing. Most people probably don't think that either. That economic output of manufacturing is larger than it's ever been in our history. Larger than the days of steel, larger than that. I'll explain to you why and where that is coming from. Healthcare and education. And then the fourth largest bundle is professional and business services, which is a catch-all for lots of things, from engineers to architects to doctors to lots of small businesses, contractors, all those things that go into probably industries which many of you have worked in. What's interesting about that top four sectors today versus I talked about 1995. It's very balanced. So from 8.1 billion to 5.3 billion, all within about 3 billion of each other, with 4 legs on the table, right? No market's ever recession proof, but you want that balance. If you would have seen this chart back in the 80s and 90s, all eggs were in a single basket, right? Much more dangerous. Second tier, which is a big drop off, but you got information, that's IT, that's whatever's left of media and information, retail, bricks and mortar retail, transportation, e-commerce, and restaurants and hospitality, basically, you know, this and all the growth of the downtowns and so forth. Much smaller output, but a huge part of the whole quality of life. Over 15,000 businesses exist in the 2 counties, many of them very small, 20 and under, 10 and under. That's the largest core of businesses across the Lehigh Valley. 327,000 jobs across the region. And here's the big number, and it starts to explain a lot of the growth, is that within a 1-hour drive, basically a doable commuting distance depending on the wage, you have about 1.3 million people. And any company that wishes to remain somewhere or looks at going somewhere is the number one thing they're looking at. What's your population? How many people do you have? Do you have workforce? Number one issue we deal with was a good problem to have. Very different problem I had when I was mayor back in my 3rd month in office when the steel company closed and we worried about having jobs. Now today we worry about having people for jobs. A conversation I have with every employer is, do you have people for the job output that we have? And do you have people with the right skills for the jobs that we're creating? 2 different conversations, but 2 different sides of the same coin. Here's an interesting thing. So this shows like a labor shed. So the middle number here, a little hard to read, but right in the middle, if you live in the Lehigh Valley zip code and you work in the Lehigh Valley, you fit into that first number. 197,000 people live here and work here. The arrow coming in is people who live outside of one of our zip codes but come in here to work. And the other one obviously is people who live in our zip codes and leave our 2 counties to go to work. This number has become about equal. As you can see, if you can't see in the back, 101,000 coming in, 103,000 going out. When I first started this job 10 years ago, there was about a 25,000 person gap in that, people leaving versus coming in. What's happened is the Lehigh Valley has become a job center for many surrounding counties. And I'll show you here. This is people coming in. These are the top counties of people living in but working in the Lehigh Valley. As you can see, the upper Philadelphia suburbs, Montgomery and Bucks, particularly the eastern end of Berks County, which borders on Lehigh. Philadelphia County, pretty interesting. People living in the city, because Philly is a city and a county, but working in the Lehigh Valley. And then Warren County, New Jersey, obviously touching against Northampton here. Commuting out, just about the same. But interestingly, what you don't see in that number is New York. You don't see New Jersey. You don't see Warren County. We tend to think, well, everybody who leaves on a Transbridge bus and goes to the city. It's actually a very small number. And this is why the whole, and I don't want to go down this road today, but this is why the whole discussion about restoration of passenger rail in New York will be always a challenge. It's only about 8,000 people who commuted in New York. And those numbers are less now because of remote work. I'll talk about remote work in a moment. Where do they work? So I've been talking about economic output. It's a little different when you look at jobs, right? Where are the jobs today? Our largest employment sector by far is healthcare, almost 60,000 people. Obviously, our two largest employers, largest employer in the Lehigh Valley is Lehigh Valley Health Network. Second largest employer is the St. Luke's University Health Network. Logistics and manufacturing 2 and 3. Logistics, a catch-all bundle for transportation, warehousing, e-commerce, the moving of products, the storing, the moving, whether it's direct to consumer, whether you're buying on your phone and your laptop and it's showing up at your doorstep, or whether it's going as part of the supply chain from major hubs in the country to retail outlets. That's part of that industry. Manufacturing, both of those sectors growing. If you put those two together, that 35 and 38,000, and just call it the industrial sector, obviously the largest employer in the Lehigh Valley. Interesting, retail is fourth. Bricks and mortar retail, which is in a bit of decline across the country because of the competition with direct to consumer. Lehigh Valley actually is holding its own compared to lots of other places across the country. We are not losing, and we're seeing some because we work with the prospects, the companies who are coming into the market. We're seeing a rebounding interest from retailers and commercial. A lot of it, more of the bigger footprint discounters like a Sam's Club, Targets, Costco. We're working with Costco right now. They have a location in Lehigh County. They want to have a location in Northampton County. So there is still some movement around bricks and mortar retail. These are just some projects. These just happened in the last 12 months, right? So if you just look at the news media, whether you read online or whether you read on the paper, the only word you're going to see around development is warehouse. And not that warehouses aren't happening, but the reason it's in every headline is because you'll click on it. And because it's going to evoke some sort of feeling. You will click on it, and if you click on it, they can sell an ad, right? But you probably aren't going to read as much about this. Vibron Medical, one of the largest international producers of medical goods, their North American headquarters here in the Lehigh Valley, just added another 200 million of production with another 200 jobs, 310,000 square feet. I guarantee you that 310,000 square feet, if you glance at it, you will call it a warehouse because it is a horizontal building off of an interchange outside the central city. I will tell you that the days of manufacturers making products in buildings that look like steel stacks are long over. They make them in buildings that I guarantee you all will call a warehouse. And you probably won't like it because you'll say another GD warehouse. This is where products are made too. Important nuance, the term warehouse refers in the pejorative to a building. Lots of different things happen in the buildings that look like that, right? And this is why sometimes when you're mad at your supervisors in Forks or Palmer or wherever, when they're talking about industrial zones, they're also working on the things that everybody wants. Manufacturing jobs, make things in America, produce things here. And the Lehigh Valley produces lots and lots of things. Fresh pet. 45% of the pet food made in Pennsylvania is made in the Lehigh Valley. Food, beverage, and pet is the fastest growing sector of manufacturing in the Lehigh Valley. I just helped cut the ribbon on a company called Spot and Tango out of Brooklyn. They make high-end dog food to go direct to consumer. People are spending as much today on their animals as they used to spend on their kids. It's an unbelievable growing market. I don't have any pets. I finally got rid of 3 kids. I don't want to have another pet. 100 new jobs making pet food, delivering it all across the country. Ideal semiconductors. Right? We don't make semiconductors. We don't make technology in America. We don't make anything in America anymore. Nonsense. We make technology in America. We make products in America, and it's growing. And post-COVID, with the rest of the world discovered a term that we live within called supply chain. Nobody really came upon the term supply chain until they went to the store and the stuff they wanted to buy wasn't there anymore. And the reason it wasn't there anymore is because when times were good and there was no calamity, you were able to build these supply chains that went across oceans, went across continents, where the product could be made in China, moved across the Atlantic or the Pacific Ocean into the port of New York, and like clockwork on a truck into a distribution center, delivered to your retail outlet or delivered to your door, all with no hiccups on it, right? We've come to understand that that's fragile. That length of movement is fragile. So what does business do when they can't sell product to you? They're very good at reacting. They're very good at pivoting. We are dealing right now with more manufacturers and producers that want to be in the market than we have space for. We don't have buildings, we don't have land, and everybody's prepared, not everybody, but lots of people are opposed to building new ones, right? And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but we've got to realize that we say no more, in quotes, warehouses, there's no more places for us to put companies that want to make products here. And the reason they want to make products here even more so now is because they want to have at least one plant close to a large population. So if you've got 1/3 of the consumers in the United States within a 6-hour truck drive of where you're sitting, there's a lot of interest in making products here. And I'm not saying they're all going to pull out of Asia or Indonesia or India, but they're going to make sure they have a plant somewhere near those large population centers. So they don't go through a situation where I'm relying on a transoceanic truck or a ship to get product there. I'm relying on a port to move those products. I can't have 170 ships backed up at the port. So Evonik Corporation, Evonik spun out of their product. They put their R&D here. They do research and development in about 4 or 5 major sectors of petroleum and plastics and so forth. They've decided to locate their East Coast research and development here in the Lehigh Valley. They're up in Trexlertown on the old Air Products campus. These are all within the last 12 months. Project Evident, which is a subsidiary of Olympus. If you know what Olympus makes today, Olympus has their North American headquarters in the Lehigh Valley. They no longer make cameras. They make scopes for endoscopies, colonoscopies, for entering your body, and they are constantly researching and developing new optical technology for internal photography and visual things. So now they've opened up a repair and distribution hub here. They already have about 3,000 people working here in their main. We're working with them also now on moving some of their production and manufacturing into the Lehigh Valley. So where do we target our efforts real quickly? We've got 4 areas. I work for a board of 35 people, very interesting. It's CEOs of large employers. It's presidents of colleges and universities, and it's mayors and county executives of our largest governments. And every 3 years, we look at statistics and data and settle upon strategies of where we're going to put our efforts into marketing and to creating jobs. These are the 4 areas we work in: life sciences. We have 170 life sciences companies here today. Olympus being one of the larger. OraSure, which I didn't mention, OraSure developed the first saliva-based test for HIV. They've also now developed testing for COVID, for lots of other things. And if you have participated in any of this DNA genetic testing to see your ancestry, if you use the 23andMe product, where you kind of put some saliva in a tube and you spent your whole life thinking you're Italian, and you find out it comes back and you find out you're actually Hungarian. Some questions about what grandpa was doing or not doing. That all the back diagnostics of that takes place here in the Lehigh Valley. OraSure developed all the technology on DNA and genetic testing for that. Professional business services, tough market right now because of remote work. This is, company headquarters and so forth. I'll talk a moment at the end about remote work. And then obviously advanced manufacturing, we continue to work in food and beverage, which is a huge growth area in the market. We had an event, somebody mentioned it to me. We had an event in Easton a couple of weeks ago where we had CEOs of a bunch of Lehigh Valley manufacturers talking about what's going on in manufacturing in Lehigh Valley. We also focused on what's going on in downtown Easton, which is just phenomenal. The renaissance of Easton and the people living there, the restaurants, the nightlife, the arts and culture, which has taken place in Bethlehem and is taking hold in Allentown, which is another part of the Lehigh Valley story for another session with the Kiwanis Club. But right now I'm just talking about more the economic growth. Lehigh Valley now is the top 50 manufacturing market in the United States. So we're 49th largest. Why is that significant? We're not the 49th largest population center. So we are punching well above our weight class. About almost 19% of our economy is in manufacturing. Again, where is it happening? It's in those places we call warehouses. So we have to be careful about that. The United States as a country, manufacturing is about 12.5% of our output. So we're much above where the rest of the country is. 750 manufacturers. What do we make? Just about everything. We've got 35,000 people and growing. We are growing 11 times faster than manufacturing at large across America. These are some products, we make everything from guitars to crayons to natural gas to plastics to still heavy stuff. Victaulic makes couplings for piping. We still, believe it or not, we still make steel here too. Lehigh Heavy Forge still exists on the south side of Bethlehem, making specialized castings for nuclear reactors, for defense industry. AP Duval, we just worked with them to bring them over from Jersey. They make consumer products, deodorants, hairsprays, now being made here in Easton. They make them under many different brands. Part of the process today is you'll have manufacturing plants that produce goods for multiple different brands. Whether you're buying Menon or whether you're buying something else, it's probably all coming out of the same plant under a contract. The same with beers, soft drinks, oftentimes coming out of the same plant. Boston Beer, which is Sam Adams, makes 90% of its product here in the Lehigh Valley. When you flip on the TV and you see the ads and you see a couple of guys looking like they're from the 1800s in a stone building in Boston, that's for TV. It's all being made in Fogelsville. Now, what is this? I've kind of moved towards the end of this a bit, and what does all this translate to? Because I tend to look at it like, okay, this is all great. We've got statistics, we can explain the economy, but what does it translate to? At the end, economic development is really about, does a region have the ability to provide job opportunity for people of all different types, all different skill levels, right? Not everybody's going to go to college. Not everybody's going to be a doctor. Not everybody's going to be a research scientist. Some people aren't going to make it out of high school, right? And if we don't have opportunity, even for those people at what we would call lower skilled, where are they going to end up? Human services system, criminal justice system, struggling, not being able to realize any kind of quality of life. What has happened, and if you can read these statistics from 2016 to 2021, last year we have statistics, median wages in the Lehigh Valley gone from $17 an hour to $19 an hour. That's a really significant growth. Now, obviously, the last 6 months, we've seen heavy overlay of inflation, which is a national and international issue, which is stealing away some of the new money earned. But if the new money wasn't being earned, it would be stealing away the base of what was being made, and people would be worse off. Median household income from 2016 to 2020, from $59,000 to $69,000. That's a growth of $10,000 a year in median family income. These are United States government, United Census Bureau statistics for the 2-county region. So the economic growth is translating directly to personal income improvement for folks. A lot of that has come in, we have full employment in basically the non-skilled sector. Since my dad walked out of Liberty High School in '64 with a high school diploma, walked right down to the steel mill, got a job pouring hot metal in the Union Mold Foundry. There's probably been no better time to only have a high school degree in the Lehigh Valley than today. You have companies competing to offer you $20, $22, $23 an hour with a signing bonus and healthcare benefits. And after 6 months, you don't like the job at one place, you got an opportunity to go somewhere else. I don't know how long that will last, but that's also what's taking place in the Hayden warehouses of the Lehigh Valley. It's tremendous job growth and opportunity for workers here. How do we stack up against the state and the country? You can look at the numbers. You're better off being here in the Lehigh Valley than pretty much lots of other places in the state and the country. Poverty levels, we still have poverty. We'd like to see this number be 0, but in the census from 2010 to 2020, we had no growth in poverty level. Again, because of economic opportunity. And you can see where we are compared to the state and the country in terms of poverty levels. Real quick, I'm going to blow through this fast because I know I've been talking probably too long and I want to take some questions. I always find this interesting. This is a map of the state of Pennsylvania. There are 67 counties in Pennsylvania. From the back of the room, the darker the orange, those counties are losing population. The darker the orange is, the more population being lost. The dark orange is 5% or less, down to 4.5% a loss. The darker the blue, population growth, up to 1 to 2% a year. So you'll see the counties of Lehigh and Northampton are some of the darkest in the state. But interestingly, you'll see that Pennsylvania is not growing that well in total. All the growth in Pennsylvania is centered around Philly collar counties up into the Lehigh Valley, the southern border with Maryland, where the economy is much more connected to Baltimore and DC. And if you go west of the Susquehanna or north of the central part of the state, we're losing people. We're losing population in those areas. Why is that significant? Remember what I said. First thing any company looks at, if we're going to stay, or we're going to come, or we're going to grow there, is do you have population growth? This is a tough situation for people who are looking at the state as a whole, because that whole part of the state that once had industry, because back in the day, if Two Rivers met or there was a railroad stop and a mill grew up around that, there aren't going to be those mills there anymore. Those two rivers meeting or that one railroad stop don't matter. You need people and you need access to a big population center. Lehigh County population, Northampton County population growth. This just shows where's that population growth coming from. I want to do one more kind of interesting fact. The orange is domestic migration, meaning people from outside our counties moving in here from other states, other parts of Pennsylvania. The blue is international migration, people coming from other countries. You see the growth is coming right now, primarily domestic, people moving here from elsewhere. Here's the interesting one. First time in 100 years, last 3 years in the United States of America, more people dying than being born. The blue line are births. Blue line is births. The orange line are deaths. This is Lehigh Valley. More people dying than being born, right? Those of us who have kids in their 20s and 30s know this very well because there's not enough production of grandchildren for us. And that's irritating because I have 3 kids, 26, 30, 32, and I only have 1 granddaughter, but I do have another one on the way. But my 2 sons are not married and not producing grandchildren. And it's very irritating for me personally, but more importantly, this is a significant thing for the country because we've always gone through more people being born than dying, right? So this means that population in the United States is in decline. Now, you take population in decline with economy and growth, new jobs being created, and you got a bit of an issue long-term. We've got an issue short-term because the baby boom generation is pretty much getting retired, almost, the tail end still working, but most of the baby boom's out. I'm Generation X, the first non-baby boomer. I was born in 65, which was the official year the baby boom ended. And back then you defined generations more clearly. So the baby boom generation were years from 1946 to 64 when more than 1 million babies were born in the United States. 65 was the first year less than 1 million were born. Today we just make up names. Millennials, Gen Z, Gen Y, I can't get it straight. I don't know what generation my kids are in and all of that stuff. But the point being that Gen X, baby boom, booming out, the younger workers in, they're going to soon be more people retired than working, and that gets into the whole Social Security thing. Topic for another Kiwanis club. Not me talking about it. Get a congressperson in here. I'm out of elected politics. Where's the population of Lehigh Valley? How's that changing? 70% of Lehigh Valley is white, remaining. But people of color have increased double-digit percentages from census 2010 to 2020. Lehigh Valley Hispanic population, fastest growing, over 140,000, and 46% growth of people of Latino or self-proclaimed of Latin descent in the Lehigh Valley. So that is a part of immigration. There's the new immigrant groups that are primarily from Latin-based countries. And I'm going to end with this. This is very interesting because young people, even though I just talked about less babies being born, this is positive for the Lehigh Valley. During no time in our history since post-World War II have we had more young people staying. Ages 18 to 34, we have about 150,000, 10% growth in young people. When I left Freedom High School in 1983, basically all of my contemporaries left. The jobs weren't really there, the mill jobs weren't there. You had to seek another market to seek employment. Over time, some folks came back. For either better or worse, I never left. I've been planted here since when I was born at St. Luke's Hospital. Unemployment rate in the Lehigh Valley, that's pre-COVID, we were at 4.7%. Today we're at 4.2%, full recovery. And the labor force is growing. So the bottom number is August of 19, the most recent August of this year. You see 7,000 employee growth, right? This is why I tell you that the number one issue we deal with right now is employers saying to us, where do we get the people? Our labor force by age, we've got to get this fixed because these colors are difficult for me, but trust me when I say this breaks down those working in the Lehigh Valley by generation, right? So the green is if you're 20 to 34, that's 30% of the workforce. If you're 35 to 44, you're another 20% of the workforce. Add those two together, the majority of the workforce in the Lehigh Valley is under the age of 44. Right? I don't know how I see a few that look like they fit into that category. Most of us are not, right? So final point I'll make, I think I've said final a few times, but I promise this will be the final. I should look at the slides closer. This is interesting. So remote workers in the Lehigh Valley, been hearing all about this remote work. And back in 2019, we had 4% of our workers were working not in the office, but were working remotely. Today, that's up to 17%. So that's a new phenomenon we're dealing with in terms of offices. People who have the ability to not be right at an office or a plant or a warehouse. And what does that mean for, office occupancy and downtown and so forth and so on. But what's probably more significant is this. So the Lehigh Valley on this side, that big blue piece of the pie, 77% of our workforce doesn't have the option to be remote. Think about where most of our jobs are. Healthcare, manufacturing, the industrial sector. You got to show up for work. So when we're talking about remote workers, we're talking about a small percentage of the total Lehigh Valley workforce that has that ability to work from home. The other side is the United States as a whole. 71% of the United States as a whole has to show up for work. Sometimes if you read the business press and so forth, you would think everybody's working remote. We forget the fact that we've got a lot of people who are on the front lines. It's not an issue for them. And during the pandemic, the Lehigh Valley was pretty heroic because of our role in supply chain, because of our role in healthcare, our retail workers, people at grocery stores, at the CVS, at the Walgreens, we're out there with a lot of risk going to work and making it happen, and that's a big part of what you saw that video. That's a big part of what the Lehigh Valley does and our role in the economy. And finally, I'm going to end with a little bit of a short video here on manufacturing in the Lehigh Valley that we debuted down at the State Theater when we did the recent program on Easton and manufacturing in the Lehigh Valley.
Moving from an agricultural society through the industrial history, this Lehigh Valley region forged a nation. It was the Moravians that had settled here, and it really all started with their hands and the amount of time and effort that they put into their work and their craftsmanship turned into huge industry. The fact that there were so many natural resources that were inherent to the region, it just makes sense. Cement was huge in the region, Bethlehem steel, of course, and what really put them on the map was the world wars with the innovations that they were able to make here, right here on this property, with bending steel to be able to go into those ships. It just catapulted the whole region.
Our products are known throughout the country and even throughout the world.
With Bell Labs and the innovations that they had, this region just continued to be on the forefront of manufacturing.
The Lehigh Valley continues to drive this nation forward in manufacturing.
It's really just uniquely located.
Easy to serve the New York City, Philadelphia markets, and beyond. You've got the workforce here to serve it.
You are able to go home at the end of every day saying, we did good work, we put a good product out.
It gives you a sense of accomplishment.
Manufacturing is the way to go for me. It made me the best life that I possibly get with me and my wife.
What else can you ask for?
We have some really iconic brands here in the Valley.
Anywhere you go in the world, you'll be like, oh, I made those.
Those are perfect examples of how the innovation entrepreneurial spirit really just continued to breed in this region.
Manufacturing in Lehigh Valley has always been a very strong driver in the GDP. It's here and it's here to stay and it's going to grow.
You see something exciting, you go and become part of that. A lot of manufacturing companies are settling here in this region because of that.
Manufacturing puts the Lehigh Valley on the map.
Time, I'm glad you said for questions. If there are any questions.
I have a question about people working from home. I go by Guardian Insurance, which put up that mammoth building, which is probably mostly office space.
It is, yeah. It's all.
What percentage of those people are back to work?
I don't know specifically on Guardian. Guardian, that's actually their largest facility in the United States. We worked with them on that. They consolidated about 5 centers into that. It's about 300,000 square feet. They had room for about 3,000 workers. Question is, what percentage of them are actually back? I don't know specifically on Guardian. I will tell you that a lot of companies now have moved to what they call hybrid, where people are doing some days in the office, some day at home. And honestly, every company's trying to figure it out because of the demand for workers and the worker preference for working at home, some workers' preference for working at home. Everybody's moving gingerly on ordering everybody back 5 days a week, 40 hours a week, because they don't want to drive out of town. But the same thing's going on at PPL, ADP in downtown Allentown, Olympus, your large corporate office Air Products. Each one has a slightly different approach. Everybody has some level of people back, but not the full complement.
Very nice presentation. Well done. It's wonderful, because I grew up here in the valley too. It's wonderful to see the transition of the valley.
Yeah.
The lagging behind is our infrastructure. I mean, who wants to be in the Cedar Crest area at 3 o'clock? Forge Township is developing, and they dumped their whole population on a 2-lane road on the Cattell Street in Easton.
Yeah.
I mean, if I was South Panto, I'd put a toll booth up or something. 22, we're struggling infrastructure-wise.
Yeah. Two comments on that. One is, I mean, yes, we've become a more major metropolitan market. And what comes with it, there's upside, there's downside. More traffic, more congestion, right? It's not the Lehigh Valley I grew up in. My parents built a little ranch house out in Miller Heights. When I was in junior high school, I used to ride my bike down to Palmer on Freemansburg Highway. It's all farms, right?
Yeah.
Clearly, it's changed and evolved. It's a different Lehigh Valley. There's more traffic. Is it the level of traffic of Philadelphia, New York? No, but for many of us, adjusting to that is difficult. Second piece on the infrastructure, the tail wags the dog. The economic private sector growth is ahead of the public sector, right? Both in terms of money, movement, development. Right now, there's a lot of effort going on to expand intersections, expand roadways, improve access points. It's a hard thing to comprehend. I believe it will happen. There are spots where, I'll give you a couple of examples. Down in South Bethlehem along 412, when the old steel company was there, the roads were really tight. When they put 78 in, and everybody was complaining. Trucks were backed up. Today, drive down there, it's wonderful. It took time. I was mayor at the time, until you get in the tip plan and you get the money. Airport Road, when FedEx came in, everybody said it's going to be a nightmare. People are going to die. We widened Airport Road. We widened the other road. Drive now like Race Street, Airport Road, pretty good, right? It will take time to catch up. I'm not saying that some of these places aren't put in spots where they shouldn't be, but that's something that's an issue. But there is a lot of effort going on to try to fix intersections, widen roads, and there will be growing pains in the process. But I can't disagree with anything you're saying, but there is stuff working to try to correct it.
Just a follow-on comment. As part of the growth of infrastructure, and with supply chain being such an important part of our growth, is there anything on the front burners to develop off-highway parking for trailer trucks? The Lehigh Valley is one of the few areas I've ever been to where you can't find a truck stop.
Yeah, you're right about that. Do you know, because the Planning Commission, I know, has had many forums on transportation and truck parking. If there's any specific plans for.
I don't think there's a specific one, but the Planning Commission has engaged with an entire new committee that's focused on freight and freight management and traffic. Their initial recommendations are going to come out this year for long-term planning, so that municipal officials can see, here's where needs are for something like that. Here's where needs are for trucks to have a repair shop, whatever it is. And they are looking at things like that. It has been discussed with the expansions of I-78 out of Western Lehigh County about things like that. So that's on the mind of planners now. Like Don said, this stuff's in the works and we're catching up. It's on its way.
One thing I will say about both your comments is that I do think there needs to be planning and some restriction on growth, right? That townships shouldn't necessarily allow for industrial zones where the infrastructure is not. And also the one other thing I think is that with the industrial zones, Most of the manufacturing takes place in smaller buildings, 150,000 square feet down. The mega buildings that you'll see, 500,000 to 1 million square feet, those aren't manufacturing facilities. Those are more pick and pack, direct to consumer, e-commerce type facilities. If communities, whether it be Forks or Palmer or other communities, want to support manufacturing growth and limit some of the really big stuff, restrict the size of buildings that can be built. That by its very nature will take the use down to something that you saw what's on our target. We don't do any work with the direct to consumer e-commerce, the Amazons and so forth. Not that we don't support it, but we don't need to. It just happens on its own. We have limited resources, limited time. So we're going for the harder to find type of stuff for the market. And sometimes what we run into is we don't have enough of the smaller buildings because they're building such big stuff. So I think communities who control zoning and regulation, where a building is going to be built, if there's going to be a truck stop area, really have to kind of retool based on what's happening. And I know you've got a lot of other program to get to, so. All right.
Thank you, Don.
All right, you're welcome.
Andrew.
Thanks for having us.
And we're gonna have you sign a book. We have books that we ask our speakers to sign. Ken has them right over here. And we give those to children, various things that we do. What I had to say here, I know people are conscious of time, but I just want to say, give another round of applause to Don Cunningham. I was really glad that we were able to come together with Easton and Kiwanis clubs together on this.
Ring the bell.
Okay. All right. That was.
That's stereo.
Yeah.